Hello, thanks for joining us for the conclusion of our two-part episode about the serial killer, B.T.K. If you haven't listened to the first episode, we suggest you do that before listening to this one. But before we get into the episode, we want to let you know we'd love to hear from you if you have an interesting cold case that was eventually solved and you'd like us to cover. To suggest the case, go to criminallylisted.com. You can also suggest cases for our two YouTube channels, Criminally Listed and Paranormally Listed. When we finished the last episode, the killer, who identified himself as B.T.K, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill, had murdered 10 people between 1974 and 1991 in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. His first victims were 4 members of the Otero family, 38-year-old Joseph, 33-year-old Julie, 11-year-old Josephine, and 9-year-old Joey. He strangled or suffocated them all to death in their home on January 15, 1974. Months later, on April 4, 1974, he stabbed to death 21-year-old Catherine Bright. On March 17, 1977, 3 years after Catherine's murder, he strangled to death Shirley Vian. Nearly 9 months later, on December 8, 1977, he strangled to death 25-year-old Nancy Jo Fox. Then he took a 7.5-year break. Then on April 27, 1985, he strangled 53-year-old Maureen Hedge to death. Over a year later, on September 16, 1986, he murdered Vicki Len Wegerle by strangling her. He then took another break. This one lasted 4.5 years. Then he murdered 62-year-old Dolores Davies in 1991 by strangling her to death. Back then, the police had no idea that B.T.K committed the last 3 murders. Also, no one was investigating the first 7 B.T.K murders. The task force that was DNA testing suspects was shut down in 1986. This brings us to January 2004, the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders. On January 3, 2004, radio DJ Casey Kasem retired from hosting American Top 40. Kasem had hosted the show for over 30 years. Ryan Seacrest took over the radio show. On January 10th, British doctor and prolific serial killer Harold Shipman was found dead in his prison cell. The 57-year-old was serving a life sentence after being convicted of killing 15 patients, had hanged himself. Shipman was suspected of killing around 250 of his patients. On January 14, 2004, the number 1 song on the Billboard charts was the infectious Hey Yeah by hip-hop duo Outkast. However, only one member of Outkast, Andre 3000, wrote and performed the song. The top movie was the final film in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Return of the King. The Return of the King grossed $1.1 billion worldwide and became the second highest grossing movie at the time. It also won all 11 Academy Awards for which it was nominated. For the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, the Wichita Eagle published an article about the brutal quadruple murder. The police were hoping that the publicity might catch the attention of B.T.K. But after a month, they didn't hear from him. This strengthened their belief that he was probably dead, in prison, or moved away from the area. Around the same time, a Wichita lawyer, Bob Beatty, planned on writing a book about B.T.K. News of his plans to write the book was printed in a newsletter for retired police officers. Then on March 18, 2004, the day after the 27th anniversary of Shirley Vian's murder, the Wichita Eagle received a disturbing letter. With the letter were 4 photocopied images. One of the images was Vicki Wegerle's driver's license. The other 3 images appeared to be photos of her dead body. In the letter, B.T.K claims responsibility for Vicki's murder. A reporter went to the police with the letter and the photos. On the envelope, the return address was Bill Thomas Kilman, 1684 South Old Manor, Wichita, Kansas, 67218. The name was an obvious allusion to B.T.K. because Bill Thomas Kilman's initials are B.T.K. Also, there was an old manor street about a block from the Otero house. The investigators were interested in the communication because Vicky Wegerle was not considered one of B.T.K's victims. We're just going to take a short break from this episode to bring you a word from our sponsor, Uncommon Goods. Have you ever gotten a gift that you knew was purchased at the last minute? It doesn't feel good because it seems like they forgot about you. To be honest, I still have to buy a few last minute gifts myself, but they aren't going to know that because I'm going to buy them stuff on Uncommon Goods. Uncommon Goods is a great place for creative and unique gifts for close friends and family, or even things like Secret Santas. For example, for my brother, who's a big rock and roll fan, I'm getting him a bull made from an old vinyl record. For my friend, who's a baseball fan and an architect, I'm getting him the blueprints to the home stadium of his favorite team. Finally, for my aunt, I'm getting her a Ferris wheel hummingbird feeder. If you're worried about the gift not getting there in time, Uncommon Goods also has experiences which are just as unique and fun as their physical gifts. For example, they have a coffee tasting class, date night painting, or how about Magic 101, a show and lessons. No matter what your friends, family, or acquaintances are into, you'll find something unique and thoughtful on Uncommon Goods. Hint, hint, it's also a great place to shop for Valentine's Day. Also, with every purchase, Uncommon Goods gives $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. So far, they have donated over $2.5 million. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/listed. That's uncommongoods.com/listed for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. Then on the 19th anniversary of Maureen Hedges' body being found, Cake TV received another letter. On one page were the words, "The B.T.K. story." The second page contained a list of chapter titles. They were Number 1, A Serial Killer Inborn. Number 2, Dawn. Number 3, Fish. Number 4, Fantasy World. Number 5, The Search Begins. Number 6, B.T.K's Haunts. Number 7, PJs. Number 8, Mo Id Ruse. Number 9, Hits. 10, Treasured Memories. 11, Final Curtain Call. 12, Dusk. And 13, There Will Be More. The last page was a photocopy of a wallet that contained 2 employee cards. One was a Southwestern Bell employee card, and the second was a Wichita Public Schools Special Officers card. The third page was titled Chapter 8, and there was a puzzle with vertical letters. The problem was that no one was really sure if the communication was from B.T.K. On his other communications, he drew a logo. Also, this communication didn't give any details about his crimes. Bob Beatty thought that if B.T.K. didn't write it, he would let them know. Beatty wrote a letter to the editor encouraging B.T.K. to communicate with the investigators, and in early June, the letter was published in the Wichita Eagle. 3 days later, a man was driving to work through downtown Wichita. He saw a bag taped to a stop sign. The man got the bag and looked inside of it. There was a brown envelope. He took the envelope and tossed the bag. When he got to work, he checked out the envelope. On the front it read, B.T.K. Field Graham. He opened the envelope, and inside were 3 typewritten pages. The man handed the envelope and the contents over to the police. One of the pages contained the list of chapters from the previous letter. However, Chapter 8, Mo Id Ruse, was blacked out. One of the pages was titled C1, Death on a Cold January Morning. The writer gives a detailed description of the murders of the Oteros. The killer is a man the writer calls Rex. People who read the account of the murders said that it read like bad crime fiction. There was also a drawing of a naked female who was bound and gagged. It had the caption, "The sexual thrill is my bill." Over the next several months, B.T.K. left envelopes around Wichita. They would contain chapters from his book, The B.T.K. Story, and other times he left what looked like puzzles. There were also drawings. But luckily, B.T.K had not started killing again. However, the police were worried that it would only be a matter of time before he killed someone else. So they were desperate to find him before anyone else got hurt. The police compiled a list of facts that B.T.K had given about himself. They had no idea if any of them were true, but even if a few of them were true and someone in the Wichita area recognized them, it could lead to identifying him. So on November 30th, the police issued a press release with the information they got from his communications. The following list is from Carlton Smith's book, The B.T.K Murders, inside the bind, torture, kill case that terrified America's heartland. He claims he was born in 1939, which would make his current age 64 or 65. His father died in World War II, and his mother raised him. His mother was forced to work, so his grandparents cared for him. His mother worked during the day near the railroad. He had a cousin named Susan who moved to Missouri. The family moved around a lot, but always lived near a railroad. His grandfather played the fiddle and died of a lung disease. His mother started dating a railroad detective when B.T.K was around 11 years old. This relationship would have occurred during the years 1950 to 1955. In the early 1950s, he built and operated a ham radio. He participated in outdoor hobbies including fishing, hunting, and camping. As a youth, he attended church and Sunday school. He had a female Hispanic acquaintance named Petra, who had a younger sister named Tina. Around 1960, he went to Tech Military School. He then joined the military for active duty and was discharged in 1966. He has the basic knowledge of photography and the ability to develop and print pictures. In 1966, he moved back with his mother, who had remarried and was renting out part of her home. His first job was an electromechanic, requiring some travel. After attending more tech school, he started repairing copiers and business equipment. This sometimes required travel, and he was away from home for extended periods. He admits to soliciting prostitutes. He has a lifetime fascination with railroads and trains. But unfortunately, none of this led to the capture of B.T.K. He continued to leave packages and envelopes around Wichita. One included a doll that was tied up with yellow rope. Included in the package was Nancy Jo Fox's driver's license. On January 8, 2005, B.T.K threw a cereal box in the bed of a pickup truck parked at Home Depot. But it didn't seem like the owner of the truck noticed. B.T.K wrote a letter to Cake TV about the box. A detective went to the Home Depot and learned that an employee had found a cereal box in the bed of his truck, but he threw it in the dumpster. Luckily for the police, the garbage from the dumpster had not been collected. They found the box, and inside there was a computer-printed note. It read, "Can I communicate with floppy and not be traced to a computer? Be honest." Then asked the police, if that's the case, to post a classified ad saying, "Rex, it'll be okay." The police could trace information using a floppy disk, but they decided to lie to B.T.K, and on January 28, 2005, they posted the classified ad telling Rex it would be okay. About 2 weeks later, on February 16, 2005, Cake TV received an envelope from B.T.K that contained a floppy disk. The disk contained an RTF file. In the properties, it said it was created by Dennis at the Christ Lutheran Church. An internet search showed that 59-year-old Dennis Rader was the president of the congregation at the church. But who was Dennis Rader? He wasn't a suspect or even close to being on the police's radar. Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945 in Columbus. Columbus is a small town in the southeast corner of Kansas. Rader was the first of 4 boys. He was baptized into the Lutheran Church. When Rader was young, his family moved to Wichita, Kansas. As a young boy, Rader joined the Boy Scouts. Rader seemed like a typical young boy. He was a mediocre student and often seemed withdrawn. No one knew that Rader was harboring dark fantasies that developed when he was still in grade school. He had fantasies of bondage and torture. He would also kill neighborhood cats and dogs by strangling them. During high school, he worked in a supermarket. He graduated from high school in 1963. He attended Kansas Wesleyan College in Salina. He also joined a fraternity. While away at school, Rader started breaking into homes and stealing small items. Rader had poor grades in school and dropped out after a year. He then returned to Wichita. When Rader was 21, he joined the U.S. Air Force. He spent time in Japan, Korea, Greece, and Turkey. He finished his service in 1970. Nothing about Rader really stuck out during his 4 years of service. When he finished his service, Rader returned to Wichita. He started dating a young woman named Paula Dietz, who had attended the same high school as him and was also a Lutheran. They were married on May 22, 1971, when Rader was 26 and Paula was 23. They settled in Park City. Butler started attending Butler County Community College in El Dorado, Colorado, and studied electronics. While attending college, Rader worked at the meat department at a supermarket. In 1972, he went to work at Coleman, which is where Julia Ortega and Catherine Bright worked. He worked there for 13 months. In 1973, he graduated from Butler County Community College. In 1973, he left Coleman to work at Cessna, the small aircraft manufacturing company. Then in 1973, Rader began attending night school at Wichita State University, majoring in administration of justice. Rader received poor grades. He had poor spelling and grammar skills. It would take him 6 years to finish his degree. In late 1973, Rader was laid off by Cessna. Not long afterward, the Oteros were murdered. In 1974, Rader got a job with ADT Security Systems, installing security systems in people's homes. Ironically, many of the security systems he installed were for people who were afraid of B.T.K. In July 1975, Paula gave birth to the couple's first child, Brian. This was about a year after Catherine Bright's murder and 2 years before Shirley Vianne's murder. In June 1979, the couple welcomed their second child, Carrie. Around this time, B.T.K. went quiet for years. Then in 1985, Maureen Hodge was kidnapped and murdered. She lived just a few doors down from the Rader family. In 1988, Rader stopped working for ADT. He wasn't fired, but his boss suggested that he might be happy working elsewhere. He then became a census field operations supervisor for the 1990 federal census. In the spring of 1991, Rader got a job as a compliance officer in Park City. His main duty was being a dog catcher. People who dealt with him thought he was needlessly strict and vindictive. In one case, he was nice to a woman whose marriage was ending. But then she started dating someone. Then Rader had her dog euthanized. Throughout his life, Rader was a devoted member of the Lutheran Church. He was also a Boy Scout leader. The police were shocked when they learned that someone like Dennis Rader could be B.T.K. But the police needed definitive evidence to connect him to the murders. For years, the police had a sample of B.T.K's DNA, so the police managed to get a warrant for Rader's daughter's medical records. In the medical records was a pap smear. The DNA from the pap smear was compared to B.T.K's DNA. There was a familial match. On February 25, 2005, the police pulled Rader over as he was driving his compliance officer's truck. He was brought in for questioning. He was confronted with the DNA evidence. He then admitted that he was B.T.K. During the interrogation, Rader was informed that they had found him through the floppy disk. He was deeply offended that the investigators had lied to him. Rader then gave a detailed confession that lasted 32 hours over 3 days. He said that he called his victims projects. Rader said that he first came across the Oteros when he was unemployed. It was winter, and his wife didn't like to drive in the bad weather, so he would drive her to work. That's when he saw the family. When he broke into the house, he wasn't expecting Joseph Otero to be there. He told them that he was an escaped convict and he was desperate. He attempted to kill Joseph and Julie first. He then tried to kill Joey. However, Julie didn't die and she saw Rader murdering her youngest son. Rader then went back and killed her. He then took Joey into another room and suffocated him. When he was done, he took Josephine into the basement. He told her that night she would be in heaven with her family. He hung her and masturbated as he watched her die. Catherine Bright lived near the university and Rader noticed her when driving to class. He broke into her house and waited for her to come home. He was surprised when she came home with her brother. Rader said that things got out of control and he stabbed Catherine so he could get away from the scene quickly. He said that Shirley Vian was not his initial choice for a victim that day. He wanted to kill another woman he met at a club near the university, but she wasn't home when he went to kill her. Rader saw Shirley's son walking around and he talked to him. He then followed him home. Rader locked Shirley's 3 children in the bathroom and killed her. He considered killing the children, but they said someone was coming over soon. He thought that the phone ringing confirmed that someone was coming, so he decided to flee. Rader said that for weeks he stalked Nancy Fox. The night he murdered her, he told his wife he was going to the campus library to write a term paper. He broke into Fox's duplex and waited for her to come home. Rader said that Fox was surprisingly calm when she encountered him. She told him to get out, and Rader said that he wasn't leaving until he took photos of her. She told him she needed a cigarette and to use the washroom first. She also kept calling him sick. He ended up strangling her to death with a belt. Maureen Hodge was his neighbor. On the night she was murdered, Rader had taken a group of Boy Scouts for a camping trip. When they were all asleep, he went to Hedges' home. He broke in and strangled her to death. He then took her body to his church's basement. He dressed her body in different clothes and shoes and used props. He took 30 Polaroid photos. Once he was done, he dumped the body, then retrieved his car and drove back to the Boy Scout camp. No one had noticed he had left. While he was working as a compliance officer, he came across Vicki Wegerly and she caught his attention. He stalked her for several weeks. He broke into her home when he knew her husband wasn't there. Vicki told him that her husband would be coming home soon. Rader said that he thought about killing her husband, but then concluded that was too big of a risk. Rader then encountered Dolores Davis at a post office and began stalking her. He began to target older women because he thought they would be easier to control physically. Once again, he used the Boy Scout camp as an alibi. He murdered Davis in her home and then moved her body into her car. He wanted to take photos of her body in a barn or a silo. He couldn't find a barn or a silo, but he found a bridge that he thought was suitable. He took several photos and then returned to the camp. It was a multi-day camping trip. The next night, Rader snuck off again and returned to the body. He put the mask on the decaying body and took several more photos. Rader told the police that when he wasn't killing anyone, he would wear costumes and masks, tie himself up, and take photos of himself. He did this once on a Boy Scout trip and accidentally tied himself up too well. He almost wasn't able to free himself in time. On February 28, 2005, 59-year-old Dennis Rader was charged with 10 counts of murder. On June 27, 2005, Rader pleaded guilty to the 10 murders. He openly talked about the murders in court and aired his feelings and desires. One thing he didn't do was apologize. On August 18, 2005, he was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences with a minimum of 175 years. At the time of this recording, 77-year-old Dennis Rader is serving his sentence at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. One question people have is why did Rader start communicating with the police again? It is believed that he caught wind of Bob Beatty's plans to write the book and he wanted to be back in the limelight. As a city employee who worked at City Hall, Rader would have had access to the retired police officer's newsletter, which talked about Beatty's plans to write the book. Beatty's book, Nightmare in Wichita, was published in April 2005, and it was a bestseller. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We hope you found it interesting. Please don't forget to subscribe and follow us so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, please check out our YouTube channels, Criminally Listed and Paranormally Listed. But that's all for today. Thank you again for listening. We hope you have a happy and safe New Year.